Hey guys, my name is Matsumo, and welcome to your episode of Monday Mailbox. This is a video series where you, the viewer, can submit your gaming-related questions, and then I'll give my humble opinion on them. To get the formalities out of the way real quick, if you'd like to submit your own question that can be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below, or by sending me a Facebook or Twitter message. The first question really is, do you actually say the intro every mailbox? Yeah, every single time. The next question comes from Grant, and it is, what are your thoughts on the new reputation system for Siege? Do you think that it will fix the toxicity problem? So all I can say is that it is about time that they added this on in. Will it fix toxicity entirely? No. Is it going to be a massive step in the right direction? 100%. Now, the way that this reputation system works, which apparently is already in the game, they just haven't turned it on yet. I'm assuming that they're gathering data to ensure that things are going well and that it's doing its job properly. And then when it does finally go live, it's going to place everyone into either a negative, neutral, or a positive standing. Depending on your actions, you are either going to be placed into one of these categories, and that's going to have either repercussions or some benefits, some rewards. Now, Ubisoft emphasized that they want to communicate to players why they're being put into these different ranks. So if you are someone who is in the negative standing, they're going to explicitly tell you, hey, you've been TKing a lot. You should probably stop that. Or you're being toxic to your teammates in voice chat. That is something that is not acceptable, and that's why you've been placed into this category. What I was kind of surprised by is that they're going to be monitoring a lot of your actions throughout the game. And this includes taking out friendly gadgets. If you are someone who probably accidentally takes out a bandit battery every so often, you don't have anything to worry about. But if you are someone who continuously takes out your teammates' gadgets because you think that this is going to get you around this new system, you're probably in for a rude awakening. If you're someone who gets muted by your teammates constantly, maybe because you just have a bad microphone, or you're being obnoxious, or you're just outright being toxic, talking to your teammates, that is also going to notify and work into the system to let Ubisoft know that maybe you should be brought down into that negative standing rank. Once you are in these different categories, they're also going to have either rewards or some repercussions. If I had to take a guess, if you're someone who TKs all the time, you might just be placed into the friendly fire mode at the beginning of a round. So it won't even give you the chance to TK someone. You'll just be in that mode from the very start. This could also mean that maybe your mic is muted and you can only have limited communication with certain other players, maybe just your friends in game. That's also a distinct possibility. Now, as for the rewards, we also don't really know. What I'm hoping for is that they add in some cool cosmetic items that are exclusive for people that do have that positive standing. Maybe a universal skin or something along those lines, where if you're able to maintain that, you get that forever, but as soon as you drop down to maybe a neutral standing or a negative, it goes away. And so it will incentivize those players to continue to have that positivity in the game. I think that that would be a nice step in the right direction. In general, though, I'm incredibly excited for the introduction of this system. Rainbow Six Siege is no exception when it comes to competitive multiplayer video games. Many of them have to deal with toxicity, but the fact that they're finally taking some big steps to try to curb this behavior, I think is incredible, but we're gonna have to wait and see how things pan out. The next question is, are you worried about the next Battlefield having skill-based matchmaking to the degree of Call of Duty? Yeah, I think that skill-based matchmaking is something that is going to be the future for basically every multiplayer video game, and the Battlefield is going to be no exception. Now, how extensive is it going to be? That remains to be seen. One thing that might make this a bit more difficult for DICE is, how do you quantify someone's skill in a Battlefield game? For example, if someone is really good in a vehicle, let's say they're an ace pilot or they're really good in a tank, they might dominate in those vehicles. Their score might be through the roof. But as soon as they switch it over to infantry, that skill doesn't translate. They may be awful as an infantry player. And so the problem that comes up with this is that if they join into a game and the skill-based matchmaking places them based off of them being in a vehicle, but they're not in a vehicle because they're playing as infantry, they're now not going to have a very enjoyable experience. They're now going to feel like they have to play as a tank or whatever to actually have a fun match because everyone else is just stomping on them because that skill-based matchmaking is in effect. I could see that kind of becoming an issue. On top of that, the Battlefield franchise is also known for being more of a sandbox experience. I'm really hoping that we see a return to what Battlefield 4 4 was all about, where you could really try and play however you wanted to. You could use weapons that had terrible attachments on them to actually give yourself a bit of a challenge. But as soon as you do that, how is that sandbox element going to be incorporated into this skill-based matchmaking? You want to give people leeway. You want to give them the freedom to be able to experiment. That's one of the great things about this franchise. But as soon as you make people feel like they have to do well or they have to use the best loadouts to be able to compete, then I think we start to run into some problems. And so overall, I'm really curious and a little hesitant to see how EA and DICE are going to be handling this. They're already experimenting right now, I believe, in Battlefield 5 with a skill-based matchmaking to some extent. If you join a server and you do really well, it will then place you into another server the next match. And I don't know if that really sits well with me. And so clearly they're experimenting, but I don't know how far they're going to go. Now, I'm not opposed to this, at least conceptually, because I don't think that people who've been playing since day one should be going against new players. That isn't fair to them. They're not going to have an enjoyable experience, and they're probably not going to play very long. But I also think that because Battlefield has so many moving parts and there's all these different factors they have to take into consideration, that it should be quite broad. I think it's okay to have someone who is intermediate going against a more advanced player. I think that's fine just because of the way that Battlefield works. And so a long story short, yes, I think that Battlefield 6 is going to have some sort of skill-based matchmaking. I'm really just hoping that it isn't ultra restrictive, sort of like what we see with Call of Duty. But we are going to have to wait and see. The next question comes from Hilson, and it is, what do you think about an offensive operator that has a 360-degree camera that is similar to Ying's gadget shape? They can charge up his or her camera and roll it inside of a room. With one charge, it basically scans the entire room once and pings defenders inside. I like this, but I also don't like this. So the reason why I actually like it is that it is a creative way at gathering information for your team. Instead of throwing in flashes like Ying to make people duck behind cover, you would still have that interaction. Defense would need to try to hide themselves so that they aren't in direct line of sight of this gadget so they're not getting pinged, but you're also going to be able to relay that information to your squad if you need to rush on in and take everyone out. So I think that that is interesting. At the same time though, I'm not really a fan of the ping system in Rainbow Six Siege, at least when it comes to certain operators like Lion in particular. I always find it really wonky and leading to a lot of frustration where someone is able to take you out through a wall or know exactly where you are with someone like Jackal, for example. And so, while I don't think that this would be game-breaking, I really don't. I don't think that this is all of a sudden going to completely change the meta by any stretch of the imagination. I'm sort of hoping that Ubisoft, because they clearly have, but to move away from these types of operators. Now, if they ever did decide to introduce one of these mechanics into the game, I would much rather have this be a rework to someone like Lion. Having an operator like Lion or Dokkaebi where you literally just click a button and then something happens doesn't really feel all that interactive when you're playing on defense. But with this character though, you'd finally have a little bit more of that interaction. You could duck behind cover, maybe you could outright take out the gadget while it's rolling on in, much like with Ying. There'd be a lot more ways for you to counter, and also you would know that Lion is in the vicinity. He's not across the map pressing the button for his teammate that's about to rush on in. I think that that would be a better way of balancing, or at least making him much more interactive. And so overall, while this is definitely a very creative idea, and I would not be opposed to making this the reworked version of Lion, I'm not really in favor of making this a brand new character, but that is just my 2 cents. The next question comes from Watson, and it is, do you think the new Legacy mode should be here to stay? I'm loving the more simplistic gameplay. I really hope that we see this more often. I don't think that Ubisoft is going to make this a permanent mode. I don't think they're going to go down that route, but I am in favor of them bringing this back on a regular basis, and hopefully making some improvements. Mainly the fact that certain operators just don't have the right attachments. Give Doc Rook all those offensive characters the appropriate attachments, mainly the ACOG, so that it is actually more like what it was at release. I would also love if they gave us a wider variety of those original maps. House and Hereford are awesome. I'm loving, especially Hereford. It's so unbalanced, but I love it. But bring us like Old Oregon, Cafe, Chalet. I know they just got a rework, but if we were able to play on those maps in that mode, I also think that would be great. And so all in all, while I don't think that Ubisoft is going to make this a permanent mode, I'm really hopeful that they add it on a continuous basis. I would rather them just add more arcade playlists regularly instead of like every other month. Like, why not do it every other week? You've got them, just keep adding them on in. I think people would love that kind of variety. Less competitive, more of a casual experience, and that's one of the things that I've been loving about this so far. But yeah, guys, that is what it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Today's video was a bit different. I experimented with the face cam. I know it's a bit weird, and so give me your guys' feedback. Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Like, no, I don't want to see that. I don't blame you. I wouldn't either. But give me your guys' thoughts down below. As always, if you'd like to submit your own question for an upcoming episode, you can also leave a comment or by sending me a Facebook or Twitter message. But until next time, guys, have a good one and take it easy.